with the surgeries, particularly with the mastectomy, I couldn't even open the refrigerator. I'm looking at the refrigerator right now. I couldn't even open the refrigerator. So it was like all day long, can you help me? I need help. Would you be able to help me? I really got this practice, and the level of support that showed up in my circle of friends and my family and the community and the extended community and like the social community on social media of people that I've never even met personally, it was overwhelming. It was a lot to take in. And again, because I was sort of in this beginning phases of disarmoring my own heart and opening to receiving, which I wasn't very practiced at.
That was Katie Brauer, former professional snowboarder turned yoga teacher, and this is episode 29. Welcome to the Brave Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Lynn, founder of Sistership Circle and author of Open Your Heart and The Art of Leading Circle. I'm the mother of 2 girls, an 8 on the Enneagram, aka the Challenger, happily married to my business partner, Brent, love connecting with nature, and have put in well over 10,000 hours circling with other women. On this podcast, we will explore how to embody the brave woman so that you can take action on your dreams and desires, unapologetically speak your truth, and live life on your own terms. Grab a seat and a cup of tea, and let's get started.
The Brave Woman Podcast is brought to you by Sistership Circle, a worldwide organization that offers leadership training for women to start their own women's circles. Do you feel called to start a women's circle, or are you currently leading one and want to make it even better? Jean Shinoda Bolin, author of The Millionth Circle, said that the opposite of patriarchy is circle, and the tipping point for change is when we have 1 million circles on the planet. It's true. When women gather, magic happens. Women's circles are the new yoga, with stars like Jennifer Aniston coming out publicly that she's been in a women's circle for years. If you've been wanting to start a circle to bring women together in your community because you desire connection and a place to belong, or you have an existing business and want to create more community around you, then Sistership Circle has a free book for you to get started. This book will simplify the process and inspire you to get out there and put your circles on the map. To get started today, go to sistershipcircle.com/podcast-book. You'll see the clickable link at the bottom of this episode's show notes. And now, on to our show.
I'm so excited to have Katie Brauer with me today. Katie, it's been a while since we've connected, and I'm just so thrilled to have you because you are such the embodiment of the brave woman in all of the different aspects. We say bold, responsible, authentic, vulnerable, and empathetic. So I think we're really going to be tying all of that into our conversation today. And specifically, the topic that we're talking about is the disarmoring of the heart, the opening of the heart. So that vulnerability and the empathy, that this for you really started in childhood. You have such a beautiful story, a heroine's journey that we talk about on the show, but let's start from the beginning of what do you think impacted you having this armor around your heart as a kid?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and happy to share. So the first thing actually that comes to mind in what you just mentioned of this disarmoring of the heart is the principle of the Tao Te Ching of everything is slowly shifting to its opposite. That is really beautiful for me in my story, because what I've recognized as a 43-year-old woman is from the very beginning was an armoring of my heart based on the life circumstances, the family that I was born into, whom I love dearly, and they also had their limitations, and how sort of at this tipping point at 40, okay, now it's time to disarmor. So as a kid, I was a middle child, older sister, younger brother, and bless my parents, because of their own family history, they were lacking in two critical things that I think are very supportive of us moving through the world as open-hearted beings. There was a severe lack of emotional attunement. And how that looked for me as a child was it wasn't okay for me to express my feelings. When I did express my feelings, it was a problem. I was told, oh, you're so sensitive, or no, you're not. You're not feeling that. So I was invalidated. Or I was told that I shouldn't feel like that. So from the get-go, that was interesting as a kid and very, very frustrating because there wasn't a safe space for me to express myself into and to express my experience. The other thing that I sort of realized as an adult is that, and was very hyper aware of as a child, but as an adult, I think I've really recognized the impact that it's had, is this lack of physical affection that both of my parents were lacking. Just not really touchy-feely. There wasn't a lot of physical affection between the two of them. And those two pieces, along with the fact that my parents were pretty checked out, when I look back to my childhood, there's two things that really stand out. One, I don't know where they were. They just weren't around. And two, there was a real sense of a lack of safety. And all of that combined led to this independence, I think, a development of a core belief that I can't rely on anyone. I've got to do it all on my own. That has served me very, very well in my life. I've been very successful and independent, and I can make shit happen. That's kind of a slippery slope when you're getting results based on a very limiting belief. Yeah, when I look back at that, there was these layers of armor that began to harden around my heart. By the age of 13, I'd moved out of home. I sort of went down a dark path of getting into all sorts of mischief and trying to manage anger, which makes sense because there was a lack of availability for me to express myself. By the time I was a teenager, I was just pissed off and angry because there wasn't a space to express myself. I'm going to make my own space. So see ya, I'm out of here. And then I got into professional sports. I was a professional snowboarder, and the discipline that I was in was border cross, which way back then was very aggressive. There really were no rules. There were 6 people. You could smash each other. You could rip each other down. You could punch. Things changed fairly soon after that, but it was a perfect outlet for me at the time. And yeah, sort of fast forward, I had a ton of injuries through my career, and it was when I look back on these sort of chapters of my life, I was in circumstances and where I really just continued to armor. It was not natural for me to be in a place of open-heartedness and of vulnerability. That was a very, very foreign concept for me until I got into my 20s and sort of really began to lift the lid on Pandora's box of spirituality and deep personal growth and inquiry and curiosity. Beyond that, most recently in my life, I went through a series of surgeries for the BRCA gene, the BRCA gene, which is the breast cancer gene. Simultaneously, through that experience, realized that I was in a very unhealthy marriage that really was an environment. I had recreated my childhood essentially, where it wasn't safe for me to express myself. It just wasn't a safe environment, period. So that armoring just continued. And until it didn't, until I was, okay, I got to eject myself from this situation, which was terrifying. That really was a period of sort of 3 years of the dark night of the soul, being brought to my knees, all the strategies that I had used up until that point in my life, which was sheer willpower and strength. I'm just going to push through. Those strategies were not working. They were not helpful. The only thing that I could do was let go and dissolve and soften and rest into support and ask for support and ask for help. Oh boy, was that difficult. Opening.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot that you just shared right there. I'd love for us to unpack all of that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because this is it. Because this is, I think so many women listening can really relate with parents being checked out. Maybe there wasn't even one there. It's not okay to have your emotions. Definitely not okay to be angry. And no safety.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us, and I can relate as well, and there's different degrees of this, especially I think it's interesting because we can justify and we can say, oh, well, my parents were good people, right? We were privileged. I grew up in this kind of middle class. I had everything I needed, except that emotional connection, the attunement, the affection, the presence. I think such a big piece where the spiritual bypassing.
Yes.
Right. This is the piece that I think is so important for women to understand. If we're talking about embodiment, it's about the emotions, because so much of the spiritual bypassing that we see today is we can't feel these things.
Totally.
Because that's what we learned as a child. It's just not okay. So let's just get straight to bliss. And I know that this is something that you're really passionate about, is let's be real. That is the embodiment. I'll just pause there for a second and your experience with this. And
yeah, I think that there are particular gateways that we as individuals need to be willing to go through. And one of those is acceptance and forgiveness of parents or circumstance or whatever it is. I went to my first therapy session, which I paid for myself and booked and everything on my own at 14, because I was so perplexed by my behaviors that were so incongruent with my values as a human. Can you explain to me what is going on here? and that was really the beginning of me moving from this place of intellectual understanding of my parents and the way in which I grew up to the heart space of they were doing genuinely the best that they can. There's no emotional charge there at all for me. I've done so much work around it. Every once in a while, there'll be a flicker that comes up with my mom, and there's another little teeny piece for me to continue to open my heart to and forgive. But I do feel like that's a gateway that's necessary to go through, and that there are just so many layers. And one of the interesting things sort of at the beginning of this 3-year hell journey that I went through a few years ago was all the way at the beginning, the 6-year-old in me, I was not able to access in therapy. Every time the therapist would attempt to take me there, I would go numb, which is, by the way, a trauma response. That's what's called the dorsal vagal complex, where you're in a state of, it's called the freeze state. And there's a level of disassociation or numbness. It almost can feel like you're under anesthesia. And that's a sign of deep, deep trauma. When I had finally kind of freed myself from the relationship, and I was doing a podcast interview actually, and at the end of the podcast interview, I started to criticize myself. And oh my gosh, wow, this is really interesting. I'm not good enough. No one's going to like it. People are going to judge me, all of these things. And it was a podcast that it was my top podcast that I wanted to be on that year. My initial instinct was, I'm going to go jump on the elliptical. I'm going to go work out. And then, oh, interesting. Okay, no, just stay seated here on the cushion. I'm going to work. I got to check my email. And what would happen if I just sit here in this uncomfortable feeling? And okay, I'm just going to sit here. And then it was like really naming the sensation in my body and naming the feeling. And then I asked myself, when was the first time that I experienced feeling like this need to be better, this need to be the best? And oh my gosh, it was this opening into a deep well of grief from my childhood that I had been attempting to access my entire life. And for the first time, I could feel myself as a 6-year-old. I remembered exactly where I was. It was like my parents were divorcing and blah, blah. I wept, like sobbed for probably 3 weeks. And that was, looking back now, that was me crossing this threshold of the beginning, the real beginning of the disarming of my heart, and in this willingness to feel. I can feel that sort of the potency, even as I'm talking about it, excitement, and then also awe. It was so profound and such a catalyst for me for nurturing myself in a way that I really never had. That was the beginning of a whole new experience of life for me.
And so when you were 6 and your parents divorced, so was there no space for you to feel those feelings of upset? So what was the thing that was then able to get unlocked?
2 sort of threads that I've discovered throughout my life from the family dynamics, and is one, there was never a conversation about anything. Today, I arrive home and everything's different. Dad's gone. There's no conversation around. It's just like being thrown into a new normal without any context of anything that's happening. And then no conversation and no availability or invitation for questions or curiosity. It's so bizarre looking back on it. The second piece is sort of that no space for emotion. Everybody's sort of tight-lipped and you just suck it up and carry on. In this internalized experience for me as a child was, and I'm sure that many people can relate, that was the moment, this is my fault. I've done something wrong to create this outcome. It must have been me. Maybe if I'm the best, I'm just going to do my best. I'm going to be the best that I can. That's what drove my entire professional career as an athlete. And in many ways, my career and my life in every facet. Yeah, that's, again, I think I mentioned before, it can be interesting when you're getting results based on that are praised and acclaimed and people look up to. And I think that that's something that's an interesting thing to speak about, is where is the drive being generated from?
Yep. Well, the pain is our purpose and your greatest wound is your greatest gift, right? So you created a strategy that worked really well and that had you be this high-performing athlete and this high-performing entrepreneur and all these things, right? This is the heroine's journey, right? We get to the top of the mountain, or we get to the top of the corporate ladder. Wait a second. What is this? Right. And then it's that, and then it's down descent. Right.
Yeah.
And so that ends, and it's into the heart. And okay, well, I've been in the strategy and now it's time to heal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then this disarmoring of the heart, I believe, is the healing journey.
100.
And that's
oh
what
my
you've been
gosh.
through. There's these situations and the universe is throwing hardballs to you big time, because I don't think there was any way that you were going to be able to penetrate the heart, because your strategy was so solid and so working for you, right? Okay, well, let's give you this breast cancer scare. Let's take this marriage away from you. Let's literally strip you freaking naked to actually have you get this, right?
It's so funny because last night I actually had an astrology session with Shannon Aganza, who I highly recommend, Moon Gathering on Instagram. And we were looking at the chart. There was a clear square where she said exactly what you said. She was like, no, the strategy, you had to be backed into a corner with literally nowhere to go. The ultimate cosmic 2x4, one after another, after another, after another, because my willpower and my strength and my determination and my willingness to like roll my sleeves up, and like the warrior in me is nothing is going to get me down. Screw everyone else. I have developed those facets of myself to such a degree that I needed to literally be decapitated energetically, spiritually, emotionally, to do things differently. I needed to be burned to the ground. That is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. It's interesting because when it was happening, and by happening over a period of 3 years, I was always able to drop into feel the difficultness of it all, and then also be connected to and feel into, I trust that this is for my highest good. I trust that this is for my highest good. I know that in a month, a year, a decade from now, I'm going to look back on this time as the most transformative time of my life. And even though I'm only a couple of years out on the other side, that is wholeheartedly true. And I'm so excited because I feel like I got the golden ticket.
Yeah. So let's actually share what you went through, because with this breast cancer scare, you then had both your breasts removed and then a divorce. So if you could just share a little bit of the story and really what it was like to go through that. The whole thing, you documented the whole thing. You were very public, which was just so brave, but also just really inspiring for so many people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start by saying, as far as the relationship and the marriage, I chose someone that was not here and not emotionally available or attuned, not physically available or attuned. So that's interesting because he was in the military. So for the majority of our marriage, he was gone. So we'll start with that because I was on my own, running a company, successful company. I'd had a child by this stage. I was working an obscene amount of hours, same time as mothering. I was on 43 flights the first year she was born with her and the nanny. It was insane. Then my father was diagnosed with cancer, and I flew back to Australia to spend some time with him. He was sort of in his last weeks. And at the same time that I was there, my mom had said to me, hey, I think you need to get the testing, because for the BRCA gene, our family had been in this genetic testing for 20 years. The doctor that we work with in Australia had said to me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, don't do the tests now, go live your life, have your babies if you want to have kids, and come back later. My mom was just like, you need to do it. I kind of instinctively and intuitively, I could bet money on it that I've got the gene. I got tested and found out that I had the gene. Then 10 days after finding out that I had the gene, I went in for my routine mammogram and they found a lump. And okay, I'd already wrapped my head around the fact that I was going to have a mastectomy, but now you're telling me that you found a lump, and let me take all of this in stride. So it turned out that, thankfully, that the lump was benign, and I chose to proceed. For me, it wasn't a difficult choice to proceed with the mastectomy. For me, wow, I've been given this gift of an understanding, a probability that's very, very high I'm going to get breast cancer, and I can minimize it by taking these steps and these surgeries. I went ahead and scheduled all of that, and that was the time that my husband at the time was kind of finishing up his stuff in the military, and he said, I'm going to come back and look after you and da 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 da. So I began that process of the surgeries. There was 5 surgeries, which also included what's called an oophorectomy, where they take your fallopian tubes and ovaries, which sent me into menopause at a very young age. And the doctor at the time said, yeah, it's kind of like driving a Ferrari into a brick wall at 200 miles an hour when you have totally normal levels of hormones to go from that to nothing. And here's what really came from the experience was me no longer being able to deny that all of my needs in the relationship were not being met. That's number one. Me recognizing, and I'd been working on this for about a year pre all of this, was asking for help and how difficult historically was for me to receive. So a year prior, at the beginning of the year, and anyone that can relate to me, I highly recommend that you do this. On January 1st, I'm going to do a 30-day personal challenge. Every day I'm going to ask for help on something. The first day, I got an email about needing to do a slideshow for something. I didn't have time. I'm going to ask my friend Brant. And so he's really good with slideshows. So I text him. I felt physically nauseous asking. And then I sent the text, writing another text, following up to say, don't worry about it. I can do it myself. I'll figure it out. Oh, wow, this is so interesting. It's really hard for you to ask for help and to receive help. Of course, he was more than happy to help me. I felt like I was going to puke for a good week after that. That was the beginning of asking for help. And with the surgeries, particularly with the mastectomy, I couldn't even open the refrigerator. I'm looking at the refrigerator right now. I couldn't even open the refrigerator. So it was like all day long, can you help me? I need help. Would you be able to help me? I really got this practice, and the level of support that showed up in my circle of friends and my family and the community and the extended community and like the social community on social media of people that I've never even met personally, it was overwhelming. It was a lot to take in. And again, because I was sort of in this beginning phases of disarmoring my own heart and opening to receiving, which I wasn't very practiced at, it was a lot.
Yeah. I'm just so present to this conditioning, the patriarchal conditioning of becoming really good at the masculine. And for those of us, because I can so relate, even though I didn't go through that, I'm just looking at my journey and how much I was the same way, high performing, really good at my masculine. There's this wall and it's just this complete unraveling into the feminine and the receiving and asking for what we need, and how much as women we struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here you are, hit, can't even move your arms, and forced into this.
Forced.
And you were saying how 2 years ago in 2019, it was just all about nurturing yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So
remember at the start of that, right? I just need to rest. I just want to learn how to be. I remember you saying this. I need to do things a different way.
Totally.
So you're way over the masculine. Then it's like swing way over the feminine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, now how do I integrate all this? And so the last 2 years feels like it's really been your integration.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it has.
And learning how to be this different way. How do I operate in the world in a different way and not in this old conditioning anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like through, and you mentioned, and I mentioned, what really came to light through those surgeries and the experience was how unhealthy of a environment I was subjecting myself to, and a relationship that was really abusive. It's hard for me to say that. I can feel myself actually even choking. Like, it getting stuck because I've never actually said that out loud publicly. So in the recognition of, fuck, I got to get out of this, dealing with someone that is quite volatile, it was a combination of genuine terror with compassion, holding both of those, strategically trying to figure out, okay, how do I do all these surgeries? How do I navigate getting out of this in a way that is going to do the least harm to myself and my kid? When I finally got to the other side of that, someone told me, you don't really know someone until you divorce them. I can say that I was and continue to be at times wholeheartedly very disappointed. But for me, on my own personal journey, I do believe it was necessary because it was a disillusionment for myself of the projection and sort of the fantasy that I was buying into, because I would hear all the things, he would say all the things, yet the actions didn't line up with that. I think that really comes back to me being an advocate for truth. What does it mean to be in the truth? To be in the truth, it means that your feelings, your thoughts, your words, and your actions are lined up, and there's coherency between those four things. That is 100% the guiding principle in my life. That is something that I hold myself to daily. It sounds easy. It's not that easy. If people listening actually sit back and say, okay, where am I out of alignment? Typically, it's a place where you're avoiding having a conversation, a difficult conversation with someone. It was like getting to the other side of that. We have a great co-parenting relationship, and I am very, very grateful to him for the many gifts that I received and learnings. But I got to the other side, and it was, thankfully, there was this component of the willpower to get through it all. So I'm thankful for that, the resilience. But when I got to the other side, I thought that I would feel like this huge rush of energy, and I couldn't function. Oh my gosh, I can't move. I cannot get out of bed. I have just gone through emotional, psychological, and physical warfare. Like, it literally felt like I had gone to war. And first of all, I never put myself in a situation like that again, because I really had to take responsibility for what did I do to get myself here into this situation? What were the red flags that were present that I turned a blind eye to, or that I didn't see, or was oblivious to, or whatever? It really came to me saying, okay, I need a year to rest. And how do I make that happen? Lo and behold, the first step was asking for help in making that happen. And I took a year of 4 months of which I barely even got out of bed. I slept, and then I'd come down and lay in the backyard, and then I'd go back upstairs. People listening, I think that it can be easy to go to a place and be like, oh, well, that's nice that she got to take a year off. In order for me, first I identified, what do I need? If I could wave a magic wand, I could have what I needed. What would that look like? I need a year. And then, okay, well, what are my baseline expenses for a year? What do I need to cover my mortgage and food? What's the dollar amount on that? 40 grand at a bare minimum. Okay, I'd already taken out loans to pay out my ex, and I didn't want to go and get another bank loan. All right, I'm going to ask a family member if they would be willing to support me and loan me 40 grand. So that I can take an exhale. Can I tell you, I was sitting actually at this counter when I wrote that email. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
And they said, what's the money for? How are you going to pay it back? When are you going to pay it back? Yeah, we'll support you. that was a huge piece of my healing journey, was that. And that kind of gave me this breathing room. Okay, my bare base necessities are taken care of for a year, and I can just look after myself. So daily, I ask myself these 3 questions. How am I feeling? What do I need? What can I and am I willing to do today to meet my own needs? Change my life. And probably at around the 6-month mark, and thankfully I have an online business, and so I was generating some income through my online business. By about the 6-month mark, I started to get my energy back, and I started re-engaging with the world and with work, but in a very different way, and paid back the money, and really have been in this inquiry around noticing the pattern of how, when I go into a launch with work, for instance, because I've done it so many times the masculine way, it's really easy for me to fall back into the push as opposed to, and having the awareness to, oh, I'm doing it the way that I used to do it. There's another way. I know there's another way because I've done it another way. It was so much easier and it was so much more pleasurable and enjoyable. So stop, pause. What can I do differently in this moment to embody more of the feminine?
And it all comes down to needs. So I love those 3 questions. We'll put those into the show notes because that is so powerful. I just want to wrap a couple things here that I'm hearing. One is what you asked, where am I out of alignment? Well, you're avoiding having a conversation. What I'm also really hearing is the truth is coherency. It's the congruency, right? And in order for us to have those difficult conversations and in order for us to be in the truth, we have to go into the heart. We have to feel just as you've done, right? So your whole journey of going back and feeling that little 6-year-old, all the ways that you have allowed yourself to feel and asking that question first, how am I feeling? Then helps to increase your capacity to be brave in the world, to have those difficult conversations, right? To do those things that you need to do, to be in truth, to be in that congruency. We want to skip over that part because that's the uncomfortable part, right? But that's where you went. Is you went into the body, you went into the trauma, you went into where it felt uncomfortable, and you healed. And then now you're out on the other side of that, right?
Yeah. In many ways, I feel like those few weeks after the podcast for sure were like me learning to reparent myself and show up for myself in the way that didn't happen as a kid. Pretty amazing, for sure.
Wow. What a journey. Thank you for just sharing all of that, the whole journey. And now here you are, and you're now operating your business in this new way.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. It's so
like on the other side of all of this.
Well, on the other side, I definitely, it's quite comical. Actually, it is really comical for me in terms of being in relationships and recognizing my own challenges with vulnerability. Then also having this self-compassion of, I never learned how to be vulnerable in relationship. So essentially, I'm like a baby bird being vulnerable. And to be able to have experiences with friends and with in intimate relationship and have others meet me with a tenderness and a sweetness when I'm vulnerable is like little bud of a flower opening and the sunlight coming in, and then the courageousness and the willingness to open a little bit more. And it's scary and it's uncomfortable because it's vulnerable. That has been just so beautiful. I said last summer. Oh my gosh, I'm tasting a flavor of life I never even knew existed. Incredible. It's amazing. Now that I've experienced that, I'll never forget it. It's really become this reference point. As far as business goes, oh my gosh, well, I got out of my own way and let go of control and really allowed my team to do their thing and to trust that they know what they're doing. And I don't need to have control of all of these aspects. And in getting out of my own way, it's really enabled and allowed them to rise up and shine and support me in a way that I've actually never allowed anyone work-wise to support me. Things feel very different. There's like a level of flow and ease. That doesn't mean that the old habits and patterns don't kind of creep back in at times, but I'm much better at catching them very soon, very early on. And so, yeah, I would say if I were to sum it up, how is life now on the other side? In one word, is pleasurable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really, sweet. There's a tenderness and a slowing down and a beingness. Yeah, a beingness. I don't rush anywhere close to as much as what I used to. There'll be snippets, but
that is the feminine in business. But it's this integration because you have all the systems and structures in place, the masculine, and you get to show up and being in pleasure and getting your needs met and being in your juiciness and the feminine. You put it all together. It's so beautiful. So we haven't really talked so much about your business, but you've definitely embodied and exemplified who you are as a coach and a leader and a facilitator and just all the things that you do. If women are wanting to explore more and know a little bit more about your work and as it relates to our whole conversation, where should they go?
They can go to my website, katiebrauer.com, or follow me on the Instagram, Katie Brauer Transform. I would love to share, just because we mentioned earlier about being in alignment, or when there's a lack of alignment, it typically is due to an avoidance of a difficult conversation. I have a free masterclass on conscious communication. It's very valuable. I would say that this particular methodology and technology radically changed my life in my 20s, minimized drama in a huge way, and really supported being able to live authentic life that's in the truth and in my truth and have these difficult conversations. So I'd love to share that.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes. So if you head on over to the blog, to the show notes, then you can grab that free masterclass. Amazing. Thank you so much. So if we can wrap this up with, you have the megaphone and shouting from the rooftops for all the women to be brave. What's the last thing that you would want to share with the audience today?
To be brave is a willingness to look at where you are and with compassion and tenderness, then recognize what it is that you need in order to grow and expand and heal, and ask for that, step into that, and celebrate yourself.
I love it. Yes. Well, thank you for being so brave, Katie, with
Thanks
your life,
for having
being
me
here and sharing. Yeah, thank you. If you just listened to this show, I'd love for you to leave the Brave Woman podcast an honest review. Reviews help podcasts like this one grow, making it more possible for me to devote my time, energy, and money to its production. If you take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@sistershipcircle.com, we'll send you one of our archetype activations as a thank you gift. If you like this show and have been watching for a while, or even this is the first one, I have an ask of you. This feels vulnerable, but I know I need to model the brave woman every day in as many ways as I can. Here's my ask. This podcast costs a lot of time, money, and energy to produce it. And in order for it to be sustainable over the long term, I need financial sponsorship. A simple way for you to support is by buying me a cup of coffee. Cute, huh? If everyone who listened bought me a cup of coffee for $1, $3, $5, it would cover the cost of production. So you can do this at sistershipscircle.com/coffee. Thank you so much for your love and support. Up next is the final episode of season 1, where I'll be sharing my number 1 takeaway from the season, which boils down to a technique that will help you expand your capacity as a leader and create more harmony in the spaces you hold. This is not just for Circle, but I believe the medicine that the world needs today.